and that could be the abomination that causes desolation because of the body itself being the temple, or that there is an actual abomination of desolation, and we can take that again back to Daniel, where it was given to us, because again, we got to remember what the Mashiach said in Matthew chapter 24. Notice what he says in Matthew 24. What did he say here? Matthew 24, verse 15, he says here, so when you see the abomination that lays waste, yours may say, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, set up in the set apart place, he who reads, let him understand. So here we know that this is a clue. It's a deeper meaning. It's not going to be cut and dry. This is something that has something to do that when we get the understanding, it's going to come to us. Okay? He who reads, let him understand. All right? But again, as we're reading this and as we take it into heart, we're going to know when Yahuwah reveals it. We're going to know what this abomination is. So now if we go to Daniel, because now he's quoting Daniel, our Creator is quoting Daniel, and it says here in chapter 11, let me see here, where is it now? We know that the first one is in chapter 9, okay, and 9:25, is it? Let's see, 26. Okay, so here in 26, and after 62 weeks, the Messiah shall be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the coming prince shall destroy the city and the set apart place. Now, the coming prince, we know that to be those who destroyed the temple in 70 AD. Okay, Titus Flavius. And the end of it is with a flood, and wastes are decreed, and fighting until the end. And he shall confirm an agreement with many for 1 week. Notice it doesn't say Israel, it says with many for 1 week. Okay, the eschatological teachers and preachers in Christianity like to say that it's with Israel. That is not the case. It says that it is with many. It never specifies a country called Israel. And it says, in the middle of the week, he shall put an end to slaughtering and meal offering, and on the wing of abominations he shall lay waste. This is the abomination that causes desolation, even until the complete end, which is decreed, and is poured out on the one who lays waste. And we know the one who lays waste is going to be Satan and the anti-Messiah. They shall be destroyed. Okay, and so then we read again about it in chapter 11, and for some reason it's escaping my eyes right now as I'm looking for it. I believe it's 31. Let me see, 31. Yes, verse 31. And strong ones shall arise from him and profane the set apart place. Again, this is the temple, the stronghold, and shall take away that which is continual. What is continual? They're talking about the offerings, the altar, what is being offered up on the altar, and set up the abomination that lays waste. Now we know that this happened before in history's past. This happened with Antiochus Epiphanes, the Greek king at the time. Antiochus Epiphanes, what did he do? You can read about it in the book of Maccabees, where he set up an altar to Zeus in the Most High place. He erected a statue of Zeus, and then they slaughtered a pig on the altar of Yahuwah. That was a desecration act. Okay, to put a pig, an unclean animal that Antiochus Epiphanes knew that was against the scriptures, but he did it anyway in defiance to the Most High Yah. Okay, this is what this was speaking of. That was a partial fulfillment of this passage. The reason why we know that this isn't the fulfillment of it in a partial fulfillment is because what we just read in Matthew chapter 24. Because now from this point, when it was told to Daniel here in chapter 11 of verse 31 to the time of the Messiah is almost 500 years. Okay, now let's back it up. Before the Messiah, about 150 years or so was when Antiochus Epiphanes did that in on the Temple Mount and desecrated the temple. Okay, this is what caused the whole thing about the Feast of Hanukkah, because when the Maccabean revolt happened, the Maccabeans were Yahudim, they were Jews. Okay, and so the sons of the Maccabees, they went there and they took over the mountain, or the mount that we call the Temple Mount, and they cleansed the temple. They overcame the Greek military, and they wiped them out from off the Temple Mount, and they cleansed the temple. Once they went into the Most High Place, they saw the menorah was knocked over, and there was no olive oil that was in the receptacles for them to light the menorah in the Most High Place to set it back up erect. So what did they have to do? They had to, once again, press olives to bring about the extra virgin olive oil, as we know today. Okay, and so, but there was enough in the receptacle just to light it for one day, but it ended up lasting, which takes 8 days, they say, to press new olive oil so that they can pour it into the receptacles of the menorah to continue to light the light that was supposed to be lit in the Most High Place. And so hence they had this rededication that happened, which we call Hanukkah today, the Feast of Rededication. Okay, and they rededicated the temple back to Yahuwah, cleansed it of all of its furnishings that was all desecrated by the blood of the pig and everything else that they slaughtered over there that they weren't supposed to do. And so this is where we get Hanukkah from. Okay, but this is, again, yes, it was a miracle, but we don't celebrate it like we do the seventh feast of Leviticus 23, because if we were to celebrate that miracle, imagine all the other miracles that has ever happened. Why are we not celebrating those? Because there was so many miracles. That wasn't the only miracle that happened. We're not celebrating the miracle of the splitting of the Red Sea. We're not celebrating that the law, not the law, because we do celebrate that. We're not celebrating every time the Messiah had given sight to the blind when he was here on the earth. We're not celebrating the day that Elijah overcame the 400 Baal worshippers and sucked up all the water and everything else that was drenched in the altar at that time. For those that know the story about Elijah and the servants of Baal. So again, it's the same thing with the Feast of Rededication of the temple. There is no place anywhere, neither does it say that the Messiah also celebrated that day. He was on the Temple Mount when that happened, but we're not told that he celebrated it. Okay? So, long story short, as far as what is the abomination of desolation, is it our body or is it the physical temple? We're not going to know until that day comes which one it actually is. I personally, I'm kind of leaning more towards the body, the physical body of the person. But that doesn't mean that there's not a physical temple that's going to be erected, because we even see what they're trying to do right now. And here it is, President Trump is probably going to fast track to help these Jewish people to build this false third temple. Notice I say false third temple because that is not the true third temple. The true third temple is going to be when the Mashiach returns, that we read about in Ezekiel chapter 44, I believe is where it's at, where he is going to erect his temple, where all the nations of the earth are going to come there 3 times a year, and they're going to pay homage, and they're going to worship and celebrate the 3 feasts of Yah, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, also known as Passover, which is at the beginning of it. Then we also have the Feast of Weeks, is also known as the Shavuot or Pentecost. And then we have the Feast of Ingathering, which is also known as the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Sukkot, also known as the Feast of Tabernacles. I hope that made sense to all of you. We are running for the Messiah, and justice be our kingdom. Jody, I don't know what you mean by that, but he is definitely our justice. I don't know what you mean by we are running for the Messiah, and justice be our kingdom. You're welcome. Repent before it's too late. Redfoot Cabin, can you explanation? What do you mean by that, Redfoot? And I should say Sister Leah, because because I did write down your name. Told you I needed a cheat sheet. Can you explain the Nazarene? The Nazarene, okay, as far as explain the Nazarene, what do you mean by explain the Nazarene? So you have a Nazarite vow, and then you have the Nazari. Two different ones. Two different meanings and two different words. The name, okay, so you have the Nazar and you have the Nazari. Oh, my eyes were itching there, excuse me. So again, the Nazari, as we know, is a branch. Okay, the branch of, as we know, I believe it's in Isaiah, where it talks about the branch of Jesse or the branch of Yashai. And we know that to be prophetically speaking of our Messiah, that he was going to be called a Nazarene. And so those of us who are followers of him, we are the branches. Okay, and so we are also known as Nazari, or plural Nazarim. Is it only me who want a bit more of the book of Nazarim? I hear you, Aliyahu. I can get into that here in a minute. We still have 2 more hours. Why do you spell out CHRIST as opposed to just saying it? And don't say JESUS, but Messiah instead. Daniel, because first of all, the word CHRIST is not a title that was given to him. That is a pagan word of pagan origins, and it comes from the earliest that we know of is Krishna. Okay, and I'm sure you probably heard of Krishna before. It's a Hindi, how can I say that without saying the GODESSES? It's a Hindi deity, okay? And so we don't say that. And as far as JESUS, we know that as another deity of the Greek pantheon, which is their highest deity, ZEUS. Just like our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters, they say that name, they literally pronounce it the correct way of the way it was given. And so we don't say that. You're very welcome, Daniel. Him, why do you say that is a name game? No one's playing games with the name. As you probably know him, and you sound like you're very well versed, and I've seen you in some other lives before. I think you and I even had some conversations before, but just want to understand what you mean by the name game. Because there is no name, there's no game in the name. The name has been obliterated for a reason, and it should be spoken, it should be phonetically said as the true name, and not given to another name, because we know that there's power in his name. People who understand Islam, they don't change the name of Muhammad because they speak English. People who speak any other language, when they worship a deity like Buddha, they don't change the name of Buddha. They still call him Buddha. Okay, same thing with Krishna. They don't change the name of Krishna. You still say Krishna. But when it comes to the name that is above all names, now it's a name game. I don't think so. That is to remove the name that is above all names, the only name that has been given to us for salvation. So there is power in his name. I would never tell somebody you can say or call him JESUS, because it's pretty much the same. That is not the case. This is why he says that he is going to remove the names of the vowels from our mouths. If that was the case, then there would be no need for him to say that. Some of us have become so wise we became fools. We have to be careful what we say, especially to those who are learning the truth. I will never defend someone calling him Jesus ever. Just like he is jealous for his name, we need to be jealous for his name. There's too many people who are watering down his name and thinking that you can just call him whatever you want. But you have all these other deities that have kept their names intact. But the only name that needs to be called by its name, and we want to just say you can call him whatever, that is not the case. It was so important that the Archangel Gabriel came down and told Mary and Joseph that you are to call his name Yahusha, for he shall save his people from their sin. We know Jesus has no meaning to him saving us from our sins, but we know that Yahusha has meaning. And that's why he was called Yahusha, because he shall save his people from their sins. And that name is Yahusha. I am is salvation. Yes, exactly. I mean, we've all used to call on that name, right? But now in these last days, he's revealing it to his people. Do not call me by that name. And he is coming back for a bride without any spot or wrinkle. This is why this work is happening. This is why people are returning to the law, because it was supposed to happen. Notice what it says about this here. Now you guys got me on a tangent, because this is the what I usually start going off of when I start speaking to a lot of the ex-gens tomorrow, right? Notice what it talks about here in Hebrews chapter 8. For if the first agreement had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. For finding fault with them, he says, see, the days are coming, says Yahuwah, when I shall conclude with the house of Yasharal and with the house of Yahudah a renewed agreement, not according to the agreement that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, that is Egypt, because they did not continue in my agreement or in my contract, and I disregarded them, says Yahuwah. Because this is those days, says Yahuwah. Notice what he says, giving my laws. Notice that, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them, write what? The laws on their hearts, and I shall be their mighty one, and they shall be my people. So the law hasn't been done away with. The law is still in effect. Now it's not on stone. Now it's written on the hearts of flesh. And they shall by no means teach each one his neighbor. That is exactly what he's doing right now. And each one his brother, saying, know Yahuwah, because they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, because I shall forgive their unrighteousness and their sins and their lawlessnesses. Remember, because we were lawless at one time, I shall no longer remember. So, what does it mean by all of this? Remember what he says, that we shall all be taught, okay, by the Father, by Yahuwah. Isn't this what he says in John chapter 6? Notice what he says here. This is exactly what has happened. 6 verse 44, let's start there. And no one is able to come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him or her, and I shall raise him or her up in the last day. And it shall be written in the prophets, or it has been written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by Yahuwah. Okay, everyone then who has heard from the Father and learned comes to me. This is what's happening. He is teaching us, from the least of us to the greatest of us. We're all being taught by his Ruach HaKodesh. This isn't something that needs to be waited until the millennial reign, like I hear some people saying, like, oh, this hasn't happened. We're not all being taught. No one needs to be taught. No, None of us should be able to be taught by another man or woman. Just like I say every Shabbat and every time I get on this live, what I share with you should be confirmation. It shouldn't be anything that I'm teaching you. If you're not understanding this, it's only because you have not read it for yourself yet. And that's why you need to rightly divide the word of truth for yourself. You cannot be led as a blind guide anymore. This is why he says this. This is why no one is going to be with excuse on that day. All the people who want to speak their own opinions, that's fine. Everyone can speak their own opinions, but only one is going to meet out at the end. Because this is why he says here, in Yahusha answering and said to them, take heed that no one leads you astray. Okay? Take heed that no one leads you astray. How do you get led astray? Because you're allowing someone to speak into your heart, speak into your mind, and you're not testing what is being told to you. And so you take it to heart, literally, and you're going to be led astray. You must do your own research. You must look into it, dive into it yourself. Don't listen to man. Why? Because man will let you down every time. Do not put your trust in man. Put your trust in Elohim. And so when people talk about the name and say that it doesn't matter what you call him, it matters in every way what you call him. It's so easy for people to say that, rolling off their tongue on this side of eternity. And when you stand before him on that day, you're not going to be able to say that, because he's going to look at you and say, while you're over here trying to defend your case of why you believed in what you believed in because you followed someone else, he's going to say, I never knew you. Depart from me, you worker of lawlessness. And the more that I'm studying this, the more that I'm realizing how close Christianity has come to this truth. And this is why he says, if it were possible, even the very elect could be deceived. If it were possible. And this is why we have to be careful, because a lot of the things that Satan says sound so close to the truth, and it sounds so right, but does it hold water? Does it line up with the word? This is why at the very beginning in the Garden of Eden, when the serpent, the Nachash, came to Kahua, you may know her as Eve, and said, did Yahuwah say that you shall not eat from this tree in the middle of the garden? And what was her comeback to him? Yahuwah says that we can eat of every tree of the garden except the one that's in the middle of the garden. We cannot touch it. He never said that they couldn't touch it. She added to his word. This is why he says you are not to add or take away from my word. Why? Because it will cost you your life. Look what it did to them in the garden. It cost them their life. This is why the Nakash, the serpent, was like, I got one. She done veered off the truth. She added, you can't eat of it nor touch it. He never said you can't touch it. He said you can't eat of it. And so when the serpent heard that extra bit, he's like, oh, I got a free thinker here. This girl, this woman here is a free thinker. I got one. That's why we got to be careful. Got to be careful. Don't let people just talk to you and say anything that they want. Can't do it. It's very, very serious when it comes to the word. And you have some of these people again, and I'm not speaking of the brother that I was just talking about here, but you have some other ones. They'll make mockery of the name, saying, oh, you Torah observant followers, you're saying Yahuwah this and Yahusha that, and they're making a mockery of the name, and they say it so in a way that is belligerent. I mean, they're like stumbling idiots the way they say it. And they don't realize they're going to be judged for the way they speak his name and say his name. How are you going to take his name and misuse it like that? And then get upset at people who want to keep his name and acknowledge his name. It's amazing how they don't realize it. And they'll say, oh yeah, but you know, you're over here showing yourself as if you're holier than thou, and you're talking this way and talking that way, but you're over here making them feel this way and that. And here's this same guy who's saying all of this and turns around and say the F you know what word. and say the S-H-I, you know what word, in the same breath. In the same breath. Unbelievable. These people have no fear of Yah in them. I'm telling you, it's amazing. It's amazing. This brings me to a passage here. Let me look for it. So Yaakov chapter 3. Notice what it says here. James chapter 3, verse 1. Not many of you should become teachers, my brethren, knowing that we shall receive a greater judgment. For we all stumble in many matters. Okay, notice he says we all. This is Yaakov, James, the half-brother of our Messiah, Yahusha. All right? The one who was leading the assembly in Jerusalem. The same one that Paul and Barnabas came to when they had this issue about what are we to teach the Gentiles. So he goes on and says, for we all stumble in many matters. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the entire body. Look, we put bits in the mouths of horses for them to obey us, and we turn their body. Look at the ships too. Although they are so big and are driven by strong winds, they are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot intends. So too the tongue is a little member, yet boasts greatly. See how a little fire kindles a great forest? And the tongue is a fire, the world of unrighteousness. Among our members the tongue is set, the one defiling the entire body, and setting on fire the wheel of life, and it is set on fire by Gehenna. For every kind of beast and bird and reptile and creature of the sea is tamed, and has been tamed by mankind, or by Adam's kind. But no man is able to tame the tongue. It is unruly, evil, filled with deadly poison. With it we Baruch our Elohim and Father, and with it we curse men, who have been made in the likeness of Elohim. Out of the same mouth proceed Baruch and cursing. My brothers, this should not be so. Does the fountain send forth the sweet and bitter from the same opening, or from the same fountain? My brothers, is a fig tree able to bear olives, or grapevines figs? So neither is a fountain able to make salt and sweet water. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his great behavior, and his works in meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast against and lie against the truth. Exactly. Do not boast against and lie against the truth. This is not the wisdom coming down from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and self-seeking are, there is confusion and every foul deed. But the wisdom from above is first clean, then peaceable, gentle, ready to obey, filled with compassion and righteous fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in shalom by those who make shalom. So again, be careful what we say out of our mouths. Be careful. Hallelujah. Let's see, praise 16:15. Brother Jimmy, for those who want to go deeper in study, can you set up something for us? I'd have to see. I do spend a lot of time already as it is on TT on the weekend, and then during the weekday, of course, I have work to do, so that makes it a little difficult. But let's see how things turn out with TT and see what happens. We'll have to check and see what we can do on that behalf. Yes, Redfoot. So are you talking about the 3 days and 3 nights? Is that what you're talking about, Sister Leah? You're welcome, Sister Victoria. Okay, yeah. So there is those that think that the 3 days and 3 nights is something that is just any part of the day. I hear people say that any part of the day is considered a day. Now, remember what we was just reading, and let me say this first, so that we know where we're starting our count. Okay, when it comes to the resurrection, the death, burial, and resurrection of our Messiah. So let's go here to Matthew. Now, remember what we was reading earlier, right? About our Messiah keeping the Passover. Okay, so remember it says, and on the first day of unleavened bread, the taught ones came to Yahushua, saying to him, where do you wish us to prepare for you to eat the Pesach, the Passover? Okay, and here we hear it says here in verse 18, and he said, go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near. I am to perform the Pesach at your house with my taught ones. Notice it says here, and the taught ones did as Yahushua had ordered them and prepared the Pesach. And when evening came, he sat down with the 12. So we know that he is eating the Pesach. This is the evening. Why do we know it's the evening? Because again, as we were saying earlier, he is keeping the feasts. Okay, he came in the volume of the book and he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He fulfilled the law, right? Pesach. When is the Pesach done? In the first new month, on the 14th day of the new month. Okay, and then it says, let me say here too. It says here, it says between the evenings. We know this should be at the evening. Okay, just so you guys know that I'm not making that up, let me show you that. And this is where the King James Version got that right. So let me go to Leviticus chapter 23 in the King James Version. And let's read that same passage. Leviticus 23. Notice what it says here. And in the 14th day on the first month at even is Yahuwah's Passover. Okay, notice it says at even or evening. All right, not between as it says here. All right, between the evening, and it has an S at the end, so it makes it sound like it's from evening to evening, and we know it's not. It's at evening, because you cannot allow any of it to be still remaining when the sun rises the next morning. So it can't be from evening to evening, which I still don't understand why they put that there here in the scriptures. But nonetheless, we see it's the 14th day, and it's to be at evening on the first month. So now let's look at this in the calendar. Okay, so here we are, the first month, 14th day, which is right here at evening. Okay, and so we see it says this is the preparation day here. This is at evening, the 14th day. So we know he didn't do it at this point. Why? Even though he's our Passover lamb, he wasn't unalived during Passover. He was unalived on the 15th. Okay, this was the high day. Remember, he went before Pontius Pilate and Herod during the daytime. And we can read that again. Let's go to Matthew, starting at verse or chapter 26. Remember here, 26, he just got done doing the Passover. He does the whole thing with the cup and the bread. Okay, do this in remembrance of me. And then he talks about how Kappa is going to deny him 3 times before the cock crows. Okay, right here, you shall deny me 3 times. Okay, and then we get to the point where it talks about how he prays in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then he says to them, rise up, because his time is to be delivered. And so here it is, it says here in verse 47, and while he was still speaking, mind you, this is nighttime already, right? It's night. And while he was still speaking, see, Yehuda, one of the 12, with a large crowd with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. And he who was delivering him up gave them a sign, saying, whomever I kiss, it is he, seize him. And so this is where Judas, as they say, Judas, with a kiss, right? And so then we see here that Yahusha is now brought before the Sanhedrin court, and he is before the high priest Caiaphas. Okay, and so they're upset with him, and they're asking him to tell us who you are and say who you are, and all of this is going on. So then they bring him before Pontius Pilate, okay, which is now the next day. Okay, so this was the evening when he had the Passover with his Talmudim, his people. Okay, and then he was taken that night, and then he was brought to the Sanhedrin court that same night. But the following day, he was now brought before Pontius Pilate. Now it's the morning, the sun is up. Okay. And so we read about that here in verse 27. It says, "And morning having come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Yahusha, so as to put him to unaliving. And having bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor." Again, this is the following morning from the Passover night. Okay, so here he is now. It's the following morning. It's this time, the 15th. Okay, so now we know he gets unalived the same day because he is brought before Pontius Pilate, and then they hang him, right? And they hang him, and it says here, "And from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour." So from the 6th hour, again, right around 12 noon, until the 9th hour, that would take us right around to the 3 p.m. pretty much. So 12 to 3. And then he calls out to Abba. And then we see that he gives up his ruach, and the veil is torn in the dwelling place from top to bottom. Okay, and then we see that they commanded that his body be taken down because night was coming. Okay, and it says, "And when evening came," notice that, so he's been on this tree till evening. When evening came, his body was brought down. Okay, so it says, "And when evening came, there came a rich man from Ramathaim, or Arimathea in some other translations, named Joseph, who himself had also become a taught one, or a disciple of Yahusha. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Yahusha. Then Pilate commanded the body be given. And having taken the body, Joseph wrapped him in clean linen and laid him in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and went away." Now, it says here, "And on the next day, which was after the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, 'Master, we remember while he was still alive, how that the deceiver said, After 3 days I am raised. Command them that the tomb be safeguarded until the 3rd day, lest his taught ones come by night and steal him away, and should say to the people, He was raised from the dead, and the last deception shall be worse than the first.' So Pilate said to them, you have a watch. Go, safeguard what you have known now." And so they did, and they safeguarded the tomb and sealed it. So now notice that it was after the preparation day. So here we go. So we had the 14th day. We just read that he kept the feast with his disciples on Passover. Then we know that he was brought the next morning, we just read that, to the Sanhedrin and also to Pontius Pilate. Okay, this is the next morning. They whipped him, beat him, and did everything else. They put him on the stake. He was up on the stake, and they said that from 12 to 3 o'clock or thereabouts, it was darkness on the land over there in Jerusalem. All right, he gave up his spirit, and then he was there until evening. He had to be brought down before evening because it was a high Sabbath. Okay, we can read about that in the Besorah of John, and he had to bring his body down. So again, it also says in the Torah that curses anyone who hangs upon the tree, and he can't be left overnight. His body must be brought down. He can't stay overnight. So they brought him down. They put him in the tomb. So this is the first night. This half of this block 15 would be the night part. Okay, that's the first night. Okay, so now let's go over here to the second night and the third night. So that's the third night. Here's the Shabbat. This is the third night. Remember, he says the only sign that he is going to give them, when the Pharisees asked him, show us a sign, he says, the only sign that you're going to have is the sign of Jonah. As he was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the son of Adam be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So now here it is again. He was taken off the pole, the stake, the tree, first night in the tomb, second night in the tomb, third night in the tomb. Now let's look at the day. Okay, since this was the first night, the next day would be here on the 16th. That's the first day, second day, and on the third day, he would rise. That's on a Shabbat. Do you guys see that? He was raised on the Shabbat. And I would say at the very beginning of Shabbat, on the third day. Okay, this is why when we read this in Matthew, it says, but late on the Shabbat, or in the Shabbat, as it was dawning into day 1 of the week, Miriam from Magdala and the other Miriam came to see the tomb. And see, there was a great earthquake, for a messenger of Yahuwah came down out of the heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. And his appearance was like the lightning, was like lightning, and his garment was white as snow. And the guards trembled for fear of him, became like dead men. So they fainted. And it says, and the messenger responded, this angel responded and said to the women, plural, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Yahusha, who was impaled. He is not here. He is not here. And this is during late in the Sabbath. He is not here. He's been gone all this time. Okay, he's not here, for he was raised. As he said, come, see the place where the master lay. So all that being said, you have your 3 days and 3 nights. You can't have more than 3 days and 3 nights and it be the first day of the week, as we've been told, because now it breaks his own word. And we know that he did not rest in the ground or in the tomb on the Shabbat. He was alive on the Shabbat, just like we're going to be alive on the last day. Remember what he says here. I shall raise him up in the last day. What does he say here in John? He says here, this is the desire of the Father who sent me, that all he has given me I should not lose of it, but should raise it in the last day. Not last days, plural, but last day. What is the last day of the 7 days of the week? It's the Shabbat. It's the Sabbath. And this is why he says, and this is the desire of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him should possess everlasting life. And I shall raise him up in the last day. He says it again. Okay? And then he says it one more time. No one is able to come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I shall raise him up in the last day. So what is the last day? It's the Shabbat. It's the 7 days. Okay? The last day of the days of the 7 is Shabbat, on the last day. What does the last day represent? A day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. Well, we know there's going to be 6,000 years of human history, and then we have a millennial rest, or the 1,000 years of rest. We are going to be raised on that 1,000 years. This is why it says in Revelation chapter 20, what does it say there? Revelation chapter 20 says this. Verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. Not going to be, but if that's the case, because of the witness they bore to Yahusha, and because of the word of Elohim. Again, as I always say, they had the witness of Yahusha, that's the New Testament, because of the word of Elohim, that's the Old Testament, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands, and they lived and reigned with the Messiah for 1,000 years. That's the 7th day, the 7th millennium. So this all coincides as the same formula. A day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years a day. That the Messiah also was raised at the beginning of the Sabbath. So hence again, he was put on the stake during the daytime, was unalived in the belly of the earth the first night on the 15th, second night on the 16th, third night on the 17th. And then we go back and now we look at the day portion. Well, he was put on the stake in in the daytime, but he was still alive, so we can't count that. He was unalived on that first evening, but here's the first day on the 16th, the second day on the 17th, and on the third day was when he resurrected. That's the Sabbath. I hope you guys all see that. Let's see. Praise 16 says, Brother Jimmy, Matthew 12:8 goes with what you said about Yahushua risen on Shabbat. Okay, let's read that. Matthew 12:8. Let's go there. 12:8. Give me some more fuel for this, yes? 12:8. When Yahuwah showed that to me, I was just blown away. Well, yes, okay, so we see that, yep, and I can see how that can line up with that too. Praise 16. For the son of Adam is the master of the Sabbath. Yes, I can see that. Yeah, the master of the Sabbath. Yes. Hallelujah. Thank you for that. Praise 16:15. So I hope that makes sense for those of you who have been taught. And this is why I say Matthew is the only Basora, the only great news that is found in its original language of Hebrew. Mark, Luke, and John say something totally different. And this is why, there's a line pen of the scribes, because it doesn't line up. So let's look at this. Mark chapter 16, it says, and when the Sabbath was past, Miriam from Magdala and Miriam, the mother of Yaakov, and let me bring that in. Sholem brought spices to go and anoint him. And very early on the day of 1 week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. Okay, so here we're told that the sun has risen, but in Matthew 28, we're told that they had not come when the sun had risen. It was just starting to dawn. Okay, so we got a conflict here. All right. Not only that, let's go to Luke. Luke says something very similar to Mark. Luke chapter 24. But on day 1 of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb bringing spices which they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. Okay, so now, and then notice here, it even adds to the story, and it says, and it came to be, as they were perplexed about this, that see, 2 men stood by them in glittering garments, and becoming frightened and bowing their faces to the earth, these said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen, or has been raised up. Remember how he spoke to you, and when he was still in Galilee, saying the Son of Adam has to be delivered into the hands of sinners, and be impaled, and the third day rise again. Notice it says third day rise again. Well, he couldn't have been raised on a Sunday if this is the third day from the time that he was unalived. That would make it 4 days. Okay, that would be extra. It can't be the first day of the week, but they'll tell you that he was raised on the first day of the week, and that is not true. It doesn't line up with Scripture. It doesn't line up with what is told to us about what is going to happen with the rest of us as we come into this truth. So here it is again. This is in John chapter 20. And on day 1 of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark. So which one is it? Did she come when the sun was raised, as it says in Mark and in Luke? Or is it according to John, where it says it was still dark? Which one is it? And it says, and stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and came to Shimon Kapha and to the other taught ones whom Yahushua loved, and said to them, they have taken the master out of the tomb, and we do not know where they laid him. Well, why would she even say that if she was told by 2 angels, according to Luke, that she saw 2 angels, or we're told that she saw 2 angels? Why would she be questioning all of a sudden that they took the body when they specifically told her, no, he was raised on the 3rd day, like he told you he was going to be raised on the 3rd day? Why are you looking for them amongst the dead? Isn't that what the angel said? That's what we just read. But here she is. She's going to run back and say to them, they have taken the master out of the tomb, and we don't know where they laid him, as if she had no idea what happened to him. This doesn't make sense. There's been lying of the pen of the scribes here. And this is why you cannot take these letters as being basura in the sense of they were Yah's breath, like you can the Old Testament. You can see that there has been some foolery going on here with those who have transcribed these letters. Or you just want to believe in traditions and don't want to see, like, hold on, we're told to test everything. Let us test what is being said. Which one is it? Which one is correct? The only one that makes sense, the only one that lines up, and it's the only one that's written in Hebrew is this one, because they couldn't change the text. They didn't expect someone to find a book of Matthew in Hebrew because they try to wipe away everything that had Hebrew writing on it. But oops, there's one. This one came out, and they can't hide it. Thank you, Jorah. Let me stand up. And so again, if you do your own study, you'll see that they have lied to us, even in the Basora. But this is what I tell everybody. Even though we see these contradictions, okay, one thing is for certain. We know that he was unalived on our behalf, he was buried, and he rose on the third day. Those three things alone, regardless of how they put it here, we know that that happened. And we can base our faith on that. No problems. No problems whatsoever. But for me, and this is just Brother Jimmy's opinion, I'm going with the book of Matthew. The other things that are written as far as what happened in the Messiah's ministry in Mark, Luke, and John, oh yeah, I read that as well. But when it comes to the resurrection, you can see how the Catholic Church wanted to spin it to the Sunday, to the first day of their pagan week, so that it makes him look like he was resurrected on Sunday. This is why they do all this stuff on the day of the sun, the venerable day of the sun, Soli Victus. This is why they do all the things that they do when it comes to their worship and their traditions of men. But we see it all has to do with the Sabbath. It all has to do with the Shabbat. And so again, just so you guys can see, notice here, let me put this back on my cradle. And I just want you guys to see this. I mean, because when I first did a study, a comparison of the so-called 4 canonized Gospels, and I wanted to see how they all lined up together, I started seeing these differences. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not no scholar and I can see this. There has to be a reason. There has to be. There's no way these contradictions just go with nobody questioning it. And that's what Christianity does. You have no pastors, none of them. And I'm not saying there isn't one or two or whatever. I'm sure there are people who have. When I say this, I'm just saying it as a blanket statement of Christianity as a whole. They don't look into this matter. They don't question it. When you talk about blind faith, that's exactly what Christianity is. But we know that there is no such thing as blind faith. In fact, let's look at what it says real quick before I do the side-by-side comparison. Hebrews chapter 11, what does it say about what faith really is? Look. And belief, yours may say faith, and belief is the substance of what is expected. Okay? The proof, not blind faith, the proof of what is not seen. Okay? Now, many of you probably know it as I do because we've been around Christian circles for so long. So let me read it out of the King James Version. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Okay, this is what most of us know it as. So let me go there and pull that up. All right, so this is what we see here. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Even here in the King James Version, it makes sense. Now, faith is the substance, something tangible, of things hoped for. The evidence, not blind faith, evidence of things not seen. Those things that we can't see, but we know there's evidence. Again, it's not blind faith. So now, with that being said, let's go and look at this side-by-side comparison of the four synoptic gospels, as they call it, okay? Meaning that they're synonymous with one another, but they are not. There are things that are synonymous, but not when it comes to the death, burial, and resurrection. No, there's all kinds of changes that has happened. So, again, let's just look at this real quick, and I'm going to read this to a certain beginning here, and we're going to see it together, right? So here it says, and we're going to read this again. But late in the Sabbath, as it was dawning into day one of the week, Miriam from Magdala and the other Mary came to see the tomb. Notice they came to see the tomb. That's the first thing we see. And then it says, and see, there was a great earthquake, for a messenger, a single angel of Yahuwah, came down out of heaven, and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. Okay? Now his appearance was like lightning, and his garment was white as snow. And the guards trembled for fear of him and became like dead men. And the messenger, singular, responding said to the women, so the women see this singular angel, this messenger of Yahuwah, and he said to them, to the women, do not be afraid. I know that you seek Yahusha, who was impaled. He is not here, for he was raised. As he said, come see the place where they lay the master. And then he says, and go quickly, say to his taught ones, to his Talmudim, that he was raised from the dead. And see, he is going before you to Galilee. There you shall see him. See, I have told you. And it says, and they left the tomb quickly, okay, with fear and great joy, and ran to report to his taught ones. All right, so now that's the end of that. Now, let's go to Mark. Let's see what Mark says about this. Now, remember, we have one messenger, only one angel, okay? And then this angel told them that he is alive, he's no longer there, and that you are to go and tell his disciples that he is going to meet them in Galilee. Okay, so now let's read Mark chapter 16. Let's see what it says there about this same thing. And when the Sabbath was past, there's already a contradiction there, Miriam from Magdala and Miriam the mother of Yaakov and Sholomah brought spices to go and anoint him. And very early on day one of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. Again, another contradiction. And they said among themselves, who shall roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb for us? So first of all, notice that they came when the sun had already risen, and now they're asking each other, who is going to roll away this stone, this large stone from the tomb? But when they came in Matthew, the stone was already removed. Okay, now we can argue for the sake and say, well, maybe they were talking about that on the way as they were going there. But again, here we are. It says, they said amongst themselves, who shall roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb for us? And looking up, they saw that the stone had already been rolled away. Now they're saying that the sun has already been risen. But we see the other one said that the sun was dawning. So the sun wasn't risen yet. And it says, for it was extremely large. And having entered into the tomb, they say they saw a man sitting on the right, wear a white robe, and they were greatly astonished. So notice now, they didn't see one sitting on the stone that was rolled away. They didn't see an angel sitting on the stone like what we read in Matthew 28. They're going into the tomb, and they see one sitting inside on the right of where he was wearing a white robe, and they were greatly astonished. And he said to them, do not be much astonished. You seek Yahusha of Nazareth, who was impaled. He was raised. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? And go, say to his taught ones and Kapha that he is going before you into Galilee. You shall see him there, as he said to you. So again, it says that they fled out and fled from the tomb and were trembling and bewildered, and they spoke to no one, for they were afraid. And having risen early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary from Magdala, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. And she went and reported to those who had been with him, mourning and weeping. So which one make sense here. We read in Matthew 28 where they said that where the women came over there to the tomb and they saw, what does it say again? Let's go back there and look at it, just so I don't add to the words. It says here, and see, there was a great earthquake, for a messenger of Yahuwah came down out of heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. He sat on it. Sat on what? The stone from the door. Okay? They see him. They see this messenger as they're coming. They're approaching the tomb. They're afraid. They see him. And he says, don't be afraid. All right? He said, he is not here. He was raised, as he said, come see the place where the master laid. So they looked in, they pierced in and looked into the tomb, and there was nobody sitting, as we're told here, inside the tomb. Here we're said that he sat inside the tomb, right? So it says here, they were greatly, and having entered into the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right, wearing a white robe, and they were greatly astonished. And he said to them, do not be much astonished. You seek Yahusha of Nazareth, who was impaled. He was raised. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. And go and say to his taught ones in Kafra and so on. And we read all of that. Okay. And they said they were afraid. And then it says here, and having risen early on the first day of the week, notice here it's saying having risen, they're already lying to you, because we know he wasn't raised on the first day, early on the first day of the week. This is an added text that it doesn't speak about in Matthew. Matthew 28 says that he wasn't there and it was beginning to dawn into the first day of the week. He was already gone. We did that just by looking at the calendar, that there's no way that he could have been raised on the first day of the week. The math doesn't add up. Okay? So now let's go to Luke. Let's see what Luke says about the same thing. And again, I would challenge any of you to look at it with your own eyes, in your own scriptures, and you tell me, how do you put these pieces together? You can't, because you can see that there has been some lying pen of the scribes going on here. Luke chapter 24. But on day 1 of the week, at early dawn, now we're going back as it was said in Matthew chapter 28, early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing spices, which what they had prepared, and they found that the stone was rolled away from the tomb. This lines up so far with Matthew. And then it goes on and says, and having entered, they did not find the body of the master Yahusha. Okay, that would line up, even though we're not told anything about the angels. Okay, Matthew said there was one angel, and then Mark said there was only one angel. Now notice what we're about to read. And it came to be, as they were perplexed about this, that see, 2 men stood by them in glittering garments. They stood by them. One wasn't sitting on the tomb or the stone that was rolled away, and one wasn't sitting